Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Iscia seminar on games and play. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Kylie van der Merwe, who will present a paper titled 404 Artwork Not Found. So Kylie is quite an impressive South African artist whose practice works at the intersection of art and technology through digitally native media. And across digital sculpture, augmented reality, and interactive installation, her work explores digital materiality, virtual exhibition spaces, and the ontology status of digital artifacts. She holds an MA in Visual Arts from Nelson Mandela University, where her research focused on digital ontology in contemporary art. Her work has been exhibited in South Africa, but also Europe and the United States, and she was shortlisted for the Sasol New Signatures National Art Competition. That's fantastic. Congratulations. In today's presentation, Kylie considers how digital technologies and game mechanics can reshape artistic practice and spectatorship, inviting exploration, experimentation, and embodied participation rather than passive viewing. At the same time, her presentation attends to the more difficult questions raised by digitally mediated art, like accessibility, preservation, platform dependency, and the vulnerability of works whose existence depends on technological infrastructures that may disappear. This promises to be a timely and thought-provoking exploration of play, not only as an artistic method, but also as a way of reconsidering what an artwork is, where it resides, and what it means when it can no longer be found. So please join me in warmly welcoming Kylie van der Merwe.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Just give me 1 second while I figure out how to. There you go. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Today, I'm going to talk you through some of my work from the past few years, and in particular, how it's led me towards thinking about game mechanics and interactive exhibition spaces. For a bit of context, I started out as a landscape painter and have always been interested in finding alternative ways of looking at landscapes as a way of creating a sense of enchantment, both for myself and for the viewer. My practice has always been driven by collaboration, exploration, and play. So with that in mind, I'd like to begin with a few earlier projects that show how those ideas developed over time. Hopefully they'll provide some context for the work I'll spend most of today's talk discussing. So, kicking it off, this body of work is called Synesthesia, created in 2016 in collaboration with my friend Julie Arts. How we approached this is we drove around the city, recording audio of places that we frequented. We then played those recordings through a speaker supporting a bowl of black acrylic ink, positioned beneath a camera and a light source. As the sound vibrated through the liquid, it produced these intricate patterns, which we photographed in an attempt to visualize the sounds of the landscape. We also captured video, which later became part of a holographic installation. As visitors entered the exhibition, they were each given a small perspex pyramid. They would then scan the photographic prints from the previous slide using an augmented reality app called Craft AR, which unlocked a corresponding video. By placing the pyramid on top of their cell phone screen, the video was reflected at a 45-degree angle into what appeared to be a floating hologram. The next project was titled Micro Landscapes. Once again, it was an attempt to shift our perspective on a familiar landscape, but this time looking at them on a microscopic scale. Working alongside my friends Sky Ray and Samantha Cornish, as well as collaborators from the Department of Microbiology, we ran around Gqeberha swabbing surfaces from places we frequented, from beaches to nature reserves to bars. We then cultured the bacteria and photographed the emerging colonies. Like synesthesia, the project also incorporated an augmented reality component. Visitors could scan each image using Craft AR to access the ambient soundscape recorded at the corresponding location, allowing them to experience the landscape through both sight and sound. A few years later, I revisited micro landscapes as part of a public intervention alongside artists Stephen Hobbs, Marcus Newstetter, Peter Binsbergen, Jonathan van der Walt, Gretel Osorio, and Julie Arts. We took the bacterial landscapes collected from Summerstrand and humid areas and projected them back onto the landscape at a monumental scale using the biggest, brightest projector we could possibly get our hands on. The projection was installed on the dome outside the enemy's science center, effectively returning these invisible microbial landscapes to the places from which they had originated. What had once existed at a microscopic scale became something that dominated the public space, inviting passers-by to encounter familiar locations in a completely unfamiliar way. Another project that emerged was an unexpected collaboration with my friend Zama Pungula, a fashion and textile designer. She approached me with the idea of translating both micro landscapes and synesthesia into a series of wearable garments. There wasn't a grand conceptual agenda behind this. We just thought it would be fun to see what would happen if these artworks moved into an entirely different medium. So this is a shirt made from micro landscapes, and this is a skirt made from synesthesia. So that's the origin story. Across all of these projects, there was one common thread that they all relied on interactive digital exhibition methods. Unfortunately, a few years later, Craft AR, which was the platform that powered the augmented reality component, was discontinued. The photographs, videos, and audio recordings still exist independently, but the experience itself was lost. Visitors can no longer scan the artworks and have corresponding media automatically appear on their devices. The interaction that connected all of those elements just no longer exists. So I graduated art school. Some years passed, I got a job, life happened, and technology advanced rapidly. I then started seeing all of these Van Gogh experience and Monet experience exhibitions popping up everywhere. They're essentially these large-scale projection installations that animate the work of historical artists. And they just weren't compelling to me. And it honestly felt like a really gimmicky cash grab. They weren't creating any new artworks, they were just digitally mediating existing analog ones. The experience is certainly more immersive, but it also felt extremely derivative. I started wondering whether technology could be used to create experiences that were native to the medium itself, rather than just wrapping older works in a new digital skin. I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out why these exhibitions bothered me so much, despite them being so incredibly popular. Eventually, I found myself thinking back to old art theory lectures and came to the conclusion that semiotics is wrong, or perhaps more accurately, the literature we still rely on is beginning to show its age. For anyone unfamiliar, a lot of the traditional literature distinguishes between two semiotic modes, primary and secondary. A primary mode is a tangible object in its first instance of existence. So this pen is a primary object. A photograph of this pen, for instance, would be a secondary. It would be a secondary mode because it's mediation of the original. The assumption is that every act of mediation fragments the object. Information is lost, transformed, compressed, and reinterpreted. And because of this, digital objects have traditionally been understood as existing in the secondary mode, always as representations of something else. This is why the Van Gogh experience felt so derivative to me. However, there is a gap in the literature. What about artworks that were never physical to begin with? A digital sculpture, an animated film, or a video game don't have original physical counterparts. It isn't a copy of anything, and it comes into existence as digital. Existing semiotic models don't have a satisfying way of describing that. And if there was a digital object in its first instance of existence, would that feel more compelling to me than the Van Gogh experience? As an artist working digitally, I thought, okay, cool. This sounds like a master's dissertation. So I went off to do my master's with Professor Peter Binsbergen and Jonathan van der Walt as my supervisors. I've always worked with the landscape and I used that as a starting point. But now I'm not just interested in the landscapes themselves, but also how museums and galleries choose to mediate them and exhibit them digitally. So I started with our local art museum's digital archive, wanting to see what happens to an artwork, especially locally, when it enters an online archive, what gets preserved, what gets lost, whether the archive could become more than just a place to store images, perhaps an exhibition space in and of itself. I didn't find anything particularly groundbreaking. It was essentially just a collection of static images on a website, not engaging, but then again, these paintings were never created with the intention of being experienced digitally. Even so, I was really drawn to them. I decided to visit the locations they depicted, and I started asking myself if these artists were making these works today with access to contemporary technologies, how might these landscapes be reimagined now, almost 200 years later? So I went back to the locations and almost immediately ran into a problem. Most of the viewpoints that the artists painted from are now completely built over. They're privately owned or they're just inaccessible. I even experimented with drone photography, but between aviation regulations and restrictions around flying over private property, that quickly went out the window. It also raised all sorts of interesting questions surrounding land access and site-specific work, which I am going to sidestep for today. But it did leave me with an important question, which was what has actually remained constant over the past 200 years? The vegetation has changed, the buildings have come and gone, the city itself has transformed completely. Eventually, after some thought, I landed on geology. The rock beneath those landscapes is the same rock that the original artist stood on almost 2 centuries ago. This became the point of continuity between the historical paintings and the contemporary landscapes. And from there, the project, later named Substratum, took off. At this point, I realized I was well out of my depth, so I drove over to the geology department and met with Callum Anderson. He was incredibly generous with his time. He gave me a crash course on Quebec's geological history and took me out into the field to collect samples from the sites that were depicted in the historical paintings at the museum. This video to play. We brought some samples back to the geology department, where we processed them into what's called thin sections. This photo in the middle here. So thin sections are essentially slices of rock that are ground down until they're thin enough for light to pass through under a microscope. So we then photographed them through the microscope using an iPhone attachment because we found that the iPhone took better quality photos than the microscope's own camera. These are some of the images that came out of that process, later titled fragments. They're microscopic photographs of mineral formations found in the rock samples collected. Among them are brachiopod shells, quartz grains, muscovite, and other minerals I can't pronounce, all ranging in age from a few hundred years to around 500 million years old. I honestly wanted to stop there because, I mean, these are so cool. How do you improve on them? But unfortunately, I was doing a master's and I had a point to make about fragmentation and digitization. So I threw them all into Photoshop and isolated individual fragments of little interesting bits I found in the images. This was all two-dimensional at the time, and I wanted to see what it would look like as a 3D object. So I then put them all into a 3D modeling software. And as I batch imported hundreds of these fragments, they all spawned at exactly the same spot in 3D, and they all started fighting for visibility, causing the software to completely glitch out. I thought this was really funny and a pretty apt representation of digital fragility, so I left it as is and named the series Glitch. I then started arranging these fragments into digital sculptures inspired by the surrounding landscapes. Every fragment remained a flat 2D plane. So as you move around the sculpture, parts of it would disappear and reappear because they had no actual volume. I like that they never quite became solid objects. They kind of spoke to the nature of digital thingness in an interesting way for me. So now I've made all these artworks and I have to think about how to display them. I am a big fan of returning things to their site of origin, but how would I do this with these digitally born sculptures? All the while I was working on this project, I was playing a lot of Pokemon Go. For those who don't know, it is a location-based cell phone game where you walk around in real life catching Pokemon. And when you find one, it opens this AR viewer through your phone's camera so you can see and catch the Pokemon as though it's standing in front of you in the real world. You also build up a digital collection of Pokemon, like the Charmander on the right, which is my Charmander that I've had since the game launched in 2016. One day while I was playing Pokemon, I thought, how cool would it be if instead of finding Pokemon, you could walk around and stumble across digital artworks on location and experience them in augmented reality? So I used the app Adobe Aero to geolocate these artworks to their site of origin. This would enable any viewer with the link or QR code to go to the site and click the link and view the object in augmented reality through Adobe Aero's built-in augmented reality viewer. The result of which looks like this. So this is the Balkans Valley sculpture on site, screenshotted through through my iPhone. This is the humid sculpture with Erin for scale. Uh, and this is my favorite sea view. Just grab a sip of water. Excuse me. Uh, there is also this compilation of the glitch artworks as well. So there exists video documentation of all of this online, the link to which I can provide later. So I made all of these artworks digital in their first instance of existence. They can be shared anywhere in the world, and wherever you encounter them, you're still experiencing the original object rather than a mediation of an original. So the question I kept getting asked outside of have you heard of Baudrillard was, is it a thing? The assumption being that because it isn't tangible, it somehow doesn't really exist. My answer is yes, digital objects are still things. They require hardware, physical interaction, sensory engagement, and embodiment in order to be experienced. Augmented reality objects, even more so. And with technology beyond commodities like NFTs, you can even own a digital original. Like that Pokemon I caught in 2016, it's a digital object, but I worked for it and it holds value to me. And if it disappeared tomorrow, I'd be really sad about it. So, what's new here, and frankly far more interesting to me, is that these are primary digital objects, new objects that are born from the unseen. They're encountered, constructed, and viewed digitally. That might not sound particularly revolutionary, but within art theory, it fills a gap left by older semiotic models that never accounted for digitally native artworks. So, one day, I logged in to work on one of my sculptures and I was greeted with the message Adobe Aero will be discontinued on the 6th of November, 2025. November 2025 was 1 month before my master's submission, and my first thought was, not again. This is honestly, it felt like some kind of sick joke because I'd already lost the augmented reality components of both synesthesia and micro landscapes when Craft AR was discontinued. And now I was about to lose my entire master's body of work because Adobe had decided to pull the plug on Aero. To avoid having nothing to show the examiners, I rushed to document absolutely everything I could: photos, videos, screen recordings, the entire creative process, and I turned it into one thing I'd spent the entire project arguing against, which was a static website full of mediations of the original work. And as promised, on the 6th of November 2025, Adobe Aero went dark and all of the work was lost. So now that the art doesn't exist anymore, is it a thing? Well, it's an ephemeral thing. I spent years arguing for digital and interactive practices in contemporary art, only to lose my entire body of work again and be reminded how fragile our digital systems really are. I genuinely believe that if we had more digital art, more people could encounter the original instance of an artwork rather than a watered down online reproduction or be submerged to more gimmicky Van Gogh experiences. But digital art is always dependent on hardware, software platforms, and the companies that maintain them. It will always be vulnerable to versioning issues, to software obsolescence, hardware failure, and so on. No matter how hard we try, these works just aren't built to last forever. So instead of insisting on preservation, I eventually came to accept that digital art is much closer to performance art or land art, in that its value is in the experience of encountering it while it still exists. With my newfound acceptance of my work's existence and non existence, I decided to put everything online. All of the surviving assets are freely downloadable for anyone to use, remix, rebuild into their own work. It's a small act of defiance against our corporate overlords and a way of decentralizing the archive of my own practice. But it's more than that. It's a gift. It's an open invitation to collaborate, to reinterpret, and hopefully give the work life beyond anything I could have created on my own. So please feel free to take a look at the website and experience it for yourself in your own time. But wait, I just spent 2 years making this stuff. I am a professional artist. I need work to exhibit, to be submitted to competitions, to conferences, to galleries, like to career stuff, like they still need to be accessible somehow. And I honestly couldn't afford to just leave it at, oh, it's ephemeral and take the knock for the sake of poetry. So, since Aero was deplatformed, I've begun working with a software developer friend of mine named Zandre Fourie to build an independent web-based AR viewer. Some sculptures are now, actually not some, all of the sculptures are now accessible again as augmented reality experiences. It is still very much a work in progress and needs a bit of refinement, but it is stable enough to use, and more importantly, it'll keep working for as long as I choose to host it. So as we move into the Q&A, if you have your phones on you, I'd love for you to give it a try. Scan the QR codes with your phone's camera, place them on your desk or anything around you, and experience them for yourselves. So that's all I have to say, really. I'm sorry the ending isn't as poetic as it could have been, but an artist has got to eat.
Kylie, that's brilliant. And before we go to the Q&A, I actually want to ask you, when you started your presentation, I told you that I'm technologically challenged. So I didn't even screenshot a code before, so I don't even know how to do it. I've got my
Okay,
phone.
so
I want to do it.
yeah, you've got your phone,
Yeah.
then just open your camera, just your
Okay.
normal phone camera,
Okay.
point it at the QR code, and
Okay.
then it should hover, like some kind of link should hover. It should ask to open something.
Yes.
There we go. So you click on that, and then it will open it in your web browser.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So you can play around with it as is. So I'm just loading it up on mine as well. So you can, this is not working. How do I? So you can play around with it like this, but if you
Yes.
look at the top, there's a button that says View in AR. So you can just click that button, and then it will open your phone's camera. And then you can move around, see where you can place it, and then you tap it to place it, and then it will anchor to wherever it is. And then
Oh
you
my
can
goodness.
around it with your phone.
You know, Kylie, before I'm inviting questions and discussions, this would be a fantastic outing for school kids. I don't know if you've approached schools, but I mean, kids these days all take their phones to school. We live in Port Elizabeth, and outing to know our own landscape, locally, it would just be a brilliant, brilliant field trip. Schools are always looking for field trips to do. I think this
Yeah,
is spectacular.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. They're unfortunately not geolocated anymore. That was something that exclusive to Adobe Aero, which we're still unable to program into our own app. But we're working on it and we'll hopefully get there. But right now, that facet has been completely lost. You can't go to the pier anymore and see that artwork standing there, unfortunately. But you can take the QR code and place it there yourself. You can place it anywhere yourself now. So
Um,
these ones that are on the screen currently are desktop versions. They're small, but the original ones are quite large. They're public sculpture size. But yeah, I've just
Spectacular.
put these for playing purposes.
Well, thank you very much for
You're welcome.
that thought-provoking presentation. I can see that Eva's got um, her camera showing, so I'm assuming you want to ask a question. Can I invite you to ask a question? You're still muted. Yeah, there we
There's
go.
that me. Sorry, we had double muting. I did not want to accidentally interrupt. Not so much even a question, but a comment on what you were saying about the schools. I think it would be a fantastic medium, even if it's not specifically geolocated, to be able to show them something in real time in front of them in a medium that excites them is so difficult. I had the experience of teaching kids and being at Legoland, and they wouldn't get off their phones and needing so much stimulation actually in this day and age, or technological stimulation, that it's such the line between where you can't actually fight it, I think is a lot of what you were saying, with also where one ends up. I mean, I don't know. I think the ending was very poetic, that it all goes digital bomb and then actually has this way of recreating, but on your own terms. Yeah, it's just honestly, Kylie, it's just amazing. And thank you. I mean, I've been to some of your things and still don't understand all the intricacies. You just explained it so well. And it's just beautiful. I'm distracted looking at the screen, honestly. Yeah.
I
But thank
appreciate
you
that, Eve.
for walking the line between it. It's such a difficult one with digital and art, and I think you're really exploring it in such an interesting way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mm.
Yeah, there have been talks as well with making a kids exhibition at the Science Center as well, just like an intro to geology and specifically Koberger's geology. So we are in the process of doing something along those lines. But yeah, it would be really, really cool if they were geolocated, but hopefully soon.
You'll have to keep
Thank you.
us posted and
Absolutely.
updated on everything that's happening with you. I see Peter Peter, feel free to unmute and put your camera on if you're happy to do so.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I don't have any comments to make, just to say, Kylie, congratulations. And we're super proud of you. I think for me this afternoon, being involved in this project as the supervisor, for the first time, I'm in the grandstand as a spectator. And it's really awesome. I think kudos to you. You and I had many boxing sessions as you poked holes in my theories of primary and secondary modalities through multimodality in visual art. And it's not often you find a student who challenges the work of the supervisor, and this is what we have. And there is so many possibilities for future research. And as soon as you have rested and caught your breath, I'll come and hook you. And there's some really exciting things in the pipeline. But congratulations. As your external examiners rightfully had mentioned, it's really cutting edge research, and the way you managed to bounce back from Adobe error. Because when I got that phone call that afternoon saying, well, we won't repeat what was said, but I really thought we were in the dwang, so to speak, and sitting down and looking logically at, as you rightfully say, that maybe the digital space isn't as cracked up as it is, because your creator space is actually being ruled by multi-billion rand corporations who are able to chop, change, discontinue software, at will. So congratulations on that. This was a formidable study, and one that's definitely going into my memory books, or setting a benchmark or a standard for future endeavors. So congratulations. And if your sights are set on a PhD, Kylie, let's go and do it.
Absolutely
Thank
not.
you
No,
very much.
absolutely
And
not. No.
great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I really appreciate it. And as always, it was a pleasure working with you.
Thanks so much, Peter. Before I move on to Adrian, I just want to make one comment, Kylie, and that is how special to have such a space with your supervisor where you do have that safe space and that freedom to banter and argue and push back. I think that's a very special thing, and not all people have it. Not all students have that experience or have that supervisor. So hats off also to Peter for that. Okay, Adrian.
Absolutely.
Hi. Thanks so much for an awesome presentation. I really loved it. AR art is very new to me, but it was really great to see this world. I have kind of just two comments. One, I would love to go to like a physical museum gallery and have my phone and see all of these in AR in a room or a couple of rooms. I think that would be so cool. And then my next comment is, I think you said you did something really important with hosting these on your own server or whatever it might be. Because like I think more and more today, like the problem of like ownership versus just renting from our tech overlords is becoming more and more of an issue. We actually, as our agency depends more and more on technology, we actually own less and less of it. So I think that what you did by hosting it is really, really actually important. And I don't know if you just had any more thoughts on that or whatever, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, ownership is a huge problem, and this is the thing is in this case, I still own the artworks, but the platform that gave the ability to experience them the way they're meant to be experienced, I don't own. And without the capability to code, I am incapable of stringing together a single line of code. I'm fortunate to have friends that can. But not everyone is able to do that, and not everyone has those resources. So access to the ability to do these things is, I don't even know how to begin with that. So I was fortunate that I was able to find a friend that could help me out a little to start working on the web browser or the web viewer. And yeah, on the ownership, I figure, there's a lot of discussion about decentralizing archives and longevity in the digital world, and what is it, the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine and all of those platforms that exist to preserve digital history and media. I try to do that in a very small way. On the website, there's just a big button that says download the art. And you can just go there and you can get everything. You can get the 3D files, you can get the photographs in high res, you can get absolutely everything you can outside of the software that makes it grants the ability to experience it. So yeah, I try to do the best I could there, but unfortunately we are always limited by what the overlords allow us to do.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Are there any more questions? I don't actually feel this is a session for questions because there's nothing to critique, there's nothing to push back on. Kylie, you just did such a fantastic presentation. So I think it's more about just discussing at this point. I see Andrea wants to make a comment, then I actually have a question. Generally about art and then how you deal with it, but I'll let Andrea go first.
Sorry, I don't have a hand-raising function because I'm the host. So I've always got to intervene jump in some other way. Kylie, I agree with Jenna. It was an absolutely wonderful presentation. And the couple of things, it's just really, in a way, comments. but maybe you can chat a bit about them. One of the things that struck me throughout your whole kind of historic, in a way, articulation of your work was the incredible amount of adaptability that you kind of showed, that each thing kind of made you curious about the next thing, and then things evolved, and there was a whole lot of adaptation going on. And I wondered if you kind of think that that kind of adaptability, I mean, were there any times where you kind of felt stuck and, I don't want to adapt anymore, that kind of thing? It would be so I'm kind of curious about that kind of necessity of being adaptable. And that also speaks to the idea that you said these works are ephemeral in a way, that in a way they can be the experience and then they're gone. But you don't want them to go because you're recreating them now. So it's also one of those kinds of dilemma type. So it was that there was the ephemerability and the adaptability, and then also something that also struck me very much in your work is how collaborative it is, and it's become. That it seemed to me that as you said, each time you had a new challenge, there was somebody who was able to kind of collaborate with you to do the geology or to do the software development or whatever it was. And I also thought that was a wonderful aspect of your artwork. So it's really just comments, just things that struck me as you were presenting. But I just wondered if you wanted to comment on my comments.
Thank you, Andrea. I really appreciate it, and I really like that. Well, I'm stoked that you like the artworks as well. I'll start with your comment about the ephemerality of the artworks. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is I never ended up presenting this final form, the screen that we have now of the 3D objects in augmented reality. I never ended up giving that to the examiners because I think we only finished the development of the app or getting it to a certain stage where it's usable in February, and that was long after examination takes place. So how the paper actually ended was, cool, we've lost everything. Here's the documentation. Digitality sucks because you have no control over anything, and right. And that kind of was a beautiful poetic way to end the paper. And I would have liked to have left it there, to be completely honest. I'm not actually tied to these. And if I were to lose them now again, I'm not too bothered. The reason I was like, okay, I need to get something going is because in February we had our master's exhibition and we had hundreds of people descending on Bird Street Gallery, and I'm the only one sitting there with no artworks. And what do I do? And I was like, okay, fine. This is what I've spent all my time making in the past couple of years. So I need to exhibit something. I need to enter it into things. So it was more out of a necessity that I had to bring it back in some way. So I would have been okay if they just stopped existing. I really am not tied to them anymore. But yeah, for now, I'm just trying to ride it out for the next while, as long as the Masters gets the attention it draws. And after about a year or two, I'll probably take down support for this as well, and you won't be able to access them. And it is what it is, because it costs money to host stuff online as well, So I'm not going to continue to host this forever. So on the adaptability thing, there was no point where I was like, I'm tired of adapting. Because as you pointed out, every time I ran into a problem, I always had a friend. I would go and complain to a friend that, oh no, I have a problem here, and the friend will be like, no, it's fine. Let's go and we will go and talk to geology and see what happens. Or, oh, we will go and talk to microbiology and see what happens. Or we'll go together and figure out how to access with micro landscapes. We had to jump through hoops to eventually get to AMPATH and beg and plead for some petri dishes and swabs, and then we had to learn how to actually culture bacteria, and then it was just this really fun learning process. And honestly, Andrea, all I want to do is make some cool stuff with my friends. I am fortunate to have a community of really talented people around me that I collaborate with very frequently, and we just get together and make some cool stuff. And I'm fortunate that every time I run into an issue, there is someone to help me get it over that hurdle, you know?
Fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Before we go on to you, Gary, I just want to touch on something Andrea said. It really sounds like you have an amazing community in the art community. I can't say I've experienced that that level of assistance in academia with other fields or other disciplines. Because I also noticed that every time something went wrong, you went to a friend and they helped you with this and they helped you with that. And I think that's fantastic. And yeah, I'll speak a bit more to that after Gary. Gary, please go ahead.
Thanks, Janelle. And Kylie, fantastic. That's really great. Just to link, I'm involved with a project looking at UNESCO heritage sites, and one of our key problems is showing the underworld, the underwater world, because people can't get to it, and at sites to this idea that you could have an augmented reality there where people could QR code and have explanation things. I mean, it's a fascinating concept. And quite an important learning in terms of the digital world. I wanted to just ask you, in terms of your sites that you chose, were they just random sites or they appealed to you in some way? How did you get to the sites? So the center one has some significance, but that's on your screen at the moment. But I was interested in your just how you made the choices.
Okay. So firstly, on the UNESCO heritage sites, NASA actually has a augmented reality viewer for space rocks. So they take like these 3D scanners and they have these space rock samples and they do like a 360 and then you can actually view and play with it online as well. So that's also another institution that's doing something similar if you wanted to have a look at it and use it as a case study. But how the sites were chosen was honestly, I went to Callum Anderson, who's the geology professor I was working with, and I was like, listen, I need to go around town and collect some samples and have a look at them. Where will I find the coolest stuff? And he was like, okay, the most interesting rock formations are found here, here, and here. And so then I went back to the archive, the municipality NMMAM's archive, and I selected my favorite paintings from there, and that's how that happened.
Okay, that's awesome. Because I don't know if you know, the site that you've got in the center there, that rock pool, is actually a stromatolite pool. So it's the oldest life form on Earth. Yeah, that's in that pool that you've taken a picture of. Yeah, so it's quite
You
quite
mentioned
interesting.
something like you mentioned something like that. That's cool. Awesome. Good to know.
Yeah, no, it's just
Almost like the
amazing.
professors know what they're talking about sometimes, eh? Yeah, that's
Cool.
very cool. That's good to know. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. To speak to what Gary said, can you imagine if there was some way that we could see underwater in Port Elizabeth? Some way of like your artwork, that experience. Gary, I think it's about, yeah, you must organize that for us, please, sometime soon. In the future, that would be incredible. Kylie, I'm going to ask, Erin posted a comment in the chat, but I'm going to ask her to speak to it, if you don't mind. Erin.
Yeah, of course.
I see Erin there, but I don't see an image of you, Erin. There we go.
Oh, sorry. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm joining from my phone from our lounge because Kylie's doing her presentation in the other room. It's something that she and I have talked about before, but just that it's interesting that in these two different realms of existence, this digital world and the tangible world, it's the same issues that we keep running into, this idea of ownership and privatization and exclusivity, that ends up excluding people and preventing access. But just questions of freedom and thinking about the early internet that I grew up with and how that felt like a kind of open world to explore versus now. I mean, social media, if say, for example, Facebook got deleted randomly one day, what would you lose if Instagram got deleted? If similar to Adobe Aero, I mean, yeah, just a thought.
Yeah. I agree, and it really, really sucks that we don't have ownership over our own things. But yeah, I don't know. Again, these people possess the capability to create the conditions for us to do cool things, but they also possess the capability to take it away. So I think the solution really is in just building communities of people where you are self-sustainable in some way, and not as reliant on external systems. But yeah.
Kylie, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm not sure how to phrase it, and I'm not sure the correct terms to use in the art world, but what happens, like the images you've created, the way you've explained them, there's so much value and there's so much meaning behind it, especially for someone working in Port Elizabeth or a geologist, for example, or an artist particularly interested in landscapes. You've explained it to us, the audience, so we understand it. We understand what it means. We understand all the effort that went into it. But for someone that has no idea, walks past and sees your artwork and says, wow, that's gorgeous, it's beautiful colors, but doesn't know the meaning behind it. I'm not sure what my question is here, but this is my thought pattern. Does a work gain more value if you understand the artist's interpretation or the artist's process? Do you think it loses some value if they don't and it's just something aesthetically beautiful? So yeah, I'm not sure what the question in there is exactly, but that's what's going on in my mind. Not just your work, but like in general your work's unique. So yes, just for your work.
I think the value is different. You can look at something and be like, that's beautiful, and be moved by the beauty of it without understanding it, and that can be enough. I grow very irritated with contemporary art, especially recently, where it relies so heavily on concept and then the execution just goes to shit. Like sometimes there is something in the beauty of it. That said, if the meaning behind it is something that's important to you, I believe this requires a lot of there's a lot of like foundation behind these sculptures, and I have had some issues. Like for instance, these artworks were entered. I spoke to Prof B about it, and he told me don't enter it into competitions this year because it is more of a study than it is a final artwork, and he is correct. But I thought it can't hurt, So I entered it into Saswani Signatures again this year, and it didn't make it because and the feedback was that the viewer felt like they needed more context, which is completely fair and completely valid. How these artworks are displayed currently are on a website, and they're accessed right at the bottom of a page that explains the entire process of how we got there. So that is kind of how I've approached displaying this. It's not something that's been sent very far and wide, but the places where they have been accessed, there have always been large artist statements available for the viewer to read and read up about it and the history of the artwork and so on. I do feel like in this particular piece of a series of work, you can't just look at it and automatically know what it's about and be moved by it. I agree with you there. So yeah.
So would you say that is Eva's saying, yes, isn't this almost all art? Let's just see what Eva said. Yes, isn't this almost all art, it draws you in through how you view it initially, but learning more adds so many layers and multitudes of meaning. Absolutely. Because if I had to now, if I had to give you a mark on this, I would say it's 70%. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous. And after you've explained everything to me, I would be like, oh my gosh, this is a 90% project. Everything all the effort you've gone through, the case that you're making for the work. So for me, yes, there's such a difference there. And I think with contemporary art or digital art or your art specifically, because I don't know how many other artists like you there are out there that do what you do, but it's so much easier to look at Van Gogh, to use one of your examples, and say, oh, there's a sun, there's a star, that's beautiful, it's impressionistic or whatever kind of artwork it is. You can't do that with yours. It's so unique. And I wonder how many other people are doing the kind of work you're doing. Is this a very novel thing happening?
Look, there are some other people doing AR art, but in my opinion, it's just really bad. Not in South Africa. I think I know of maybe one other person, and she does it commercially, like as a marketing thing for brands.
Wow.
But as an artist, I'm not familiar with many in South Africa. There are a few internationally, but yeah, see, they suck, eh? Like it's too on the nose, it's too representative. A lot of them are doing it in the name of land art specifically to try and make ecological arguments and nature-based arguments, and then they go and they mint the things as NFTs, which is a huge drain on natural resources. It's I don't know,
What
like
is
the
an NFT?
an NFT. It's oh man, it's a horrible thing. It's like Bitcoin, but if you took a digital asset and you do a thing that's called minting, so you legitimize it on the
Okay.
technology that cryptocurrency works on, which is the blockchain. So you essentially give it an identification that makes a digital object an original, an authentic original, and you can screenshot it as much as you want. It doesn't count as an original. It's only the one that's registered on the blockchain. That sort of gives it like a certificate of authenticity. So it's a way to trade digital art and have a digital original that you can own. But again, it's also very extremely inaccessible. It's technically advanced to get into, number one. It's very expensive to do, number two. And also the market for NFTs is just terrible. It's tanked immediately. All the crypto bros went and bought a whole bunch of assets, and they bought stuff for like $1 million that are now worth $200. It's the market's tanked, and it's just a horrible, horrible, horrible thing. But the technology is there, I suppose, if you do wish to own a digital original. But yeah.
And if there aren't any other questions at the moment, I'm going to ask one more question. Does the work you did for your masters, does this kind of work branch off into your actual graphic designing work that you do? Does it inspire you or to look at the work you do now in different ways?
It's definitely a transferable skill. So I do also do a lot of 3D work in my day-to-day. And there has been some requests just because of the skill set of creating AR specific work. There have been some requests in my job for me to do the same thing. Again, I work in marketing, so for marketing, create augmented reality 3D models that you would use to do sales, without saying much more about that and disclosing company stuff. But like, yes, I apply this specific workflow to my everyday as well. But this is a lot more free, obviously, because you're not meeting a brief, you're answering your own brief that you decide what to do,
Spectacular. So I've learned, I'm sure everyone here, but yeah, I'm sure everyone here knows far more about technology than me. So I've learned so much about art today and technology, which is such a bonus for me. Thank you, Kylie. I just want to ask Andrea, before we end off, do you have any last minutes? We have about 5 minutes to go. Any insight into next week's presenter?
Hi. Kylie, I just want to say, wow, it's an amazing presentation, an amazing kind of artistic journey. I think it's fantastic, and I'm hoping you will go, uh, further and further along on your kind of adaptable, collaborative route. So yeah, thank you very, very much for that. That was a wonderful presentation. Our next week's presentation is by a familiar face, Gary Kukamur. And he is actually going to do something that will be a little bit different, I think, from the play stuff that we have been, kind of, what shall we call it, dancing around. He's going to talk about local elections. And he has subtitled that The Games We Play. So that's what we'll be looking at next week. Yeah. So yeah, thanks everybody. That was wonderful. And maybe we should sign off. Have a wonderful weekend. And let's hope that Kylie can geolocate soon so that we can, I think there's many exciting possibilities there. And also, I think that Gary and Kylie should be talking. I get some nods there. Yes. Okay. Yes, indeed. So yes, connect up. It would be, I think, a very productive connection for all sorts of interesting reasons, including potentially a game and a play thing. But more on that later. Okay, so thanks everybody for joining us. It was wonderful, and we'll see you all next week.
Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you so much.